What an awesome interview we have for you guys today on the show. I am beyond ecstatic to get this one popping. I mean, we've got a former Division I football player. He played at the University of Utah joining us today. He was a wide receiver, and we're going to learn about his journey. I mean, it starts from the time he was about 9 years old when he became introduced to the sport of football. We're going to talk about the vehicle that football was for him as he went throughout his life. Then we talk about the transition from football to the next stages of his life and how that all came about, because it's not as easy as it sounds. For a lot of athletes, the transition from their sport to the next stages of life when that sport is over can be very, very difficult. But we're going to talk to him about what he went through and his experiences, but what he's also doing now to help others that are going through the same thing. Man, we're talking about a published author, an artist, right? A speaker. This guy is a full-on entrepreneur. And he is amazing. And he's leveraging some of those skill sets that he acquired through his sports journey into his business life now. And we're going to talk to him about it today on the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. We are now into month 4 of my 8th year. We've finished 7 years of the podcast, going into year number 8. We're already like a third of the way through the year almost. Like, this is crazy. But I want to shout out everybody who has ever tuned into this podcast. And if you're new to the show, this might be your first time watching or listening, welcome aboard. I am grateful to have anybody here because you guys get to be uplifted and educated by our guests the same way that I do. See, the reason I started this show back in 2017 is because I love to be educated. I love to learn, and I love sports. So if I can do a mixture of both and see how the parallels rock between sports and business and life, like all at the same time, and learn from people's stories, that's massive. I'm a big believer in stories. Just like, if you can share your story, you can help uplift other people and help educate other people and help them in some form or fashion. So thank you guys for tuning in. I will be fully transparent. I love when people subscribe to the podcast. So if you're listening to this, and let's just say it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is on your device, I'd love a 5-star review if you feel up to it, and maybe just hit the subscribe button. But if you're watching it on YouTube, that's my smallest platform. I never optimized that like I should have back in the day, but that doesn't mean I can't do it now. I'm just encouraging anybody who comes across the video version of this podcast to follow me on YouTube as we continue to build that platform out. It takes a village, and I just would appreciate it. Now, the show has been downloaded in 182 countries, all 50 states. So let's continue to build this. Let's build the YouTube platform now. The audio platform's already been established. So let's get this thing going. Guys, I am stoked today. A friend of mine who was also on this show months and months ago, about almost a year ago now, his name was Garrett Crone. We talked about mental performance in sports. He hits me up a couple weeks ago and tells me about Scott. His name's Kenneth Scott. He tells me, dude, you got to get this guy on your show. He was first telling me about a TED Talk of yours. And then he's telling me all about this stuff. And he goes, dude, you got to get him on your show. I don't know why I haven't told you this. And I'm like, let's go. So he got me the contact information. I hit up Kenneth Scott, who we will refer to as K Scott throughout the rest of the interview. And now we are here talking about his story. So K Scott, thanks for joining the show, man.
Man, it is a pleasure. I appreciate it. And man, congrats to how long you've been doing it, man. That's the biggest thing, like the consistency in this shows, man. I was looking back at from the beginning, right? And you can see the progression and the tightness stuff, how you're getting into your groove. And so if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. I don't know. I heard every 5-star review is giving out a gift card. I'm just playing. But no, we love those subscribers. Love those gift cards. Love those 5-star reviews. Support the movement, man. So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so we're giving out gift cards sponsored by K Scott himself. So yeah, just let me know. Hit that 5-star review and let's get this thing rocking and rolling. So K Scott, we're going to talk about your athletic career before we get to like any of the stuff that you're doing now as far as your business stuff, which is super, super cool. Like I said, the whole point of this, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the parallels between sports and life, but I want to get to know you as an athlete first and unbox that a little bit. You're a former collegiate athlete, played at the University of Utah. You played big time football. Big time. But before that, see, everyone they see a finished product. They don't know what went on behind the scenes to get there, right? And so I want to kind of get a little bit of a feel of what it was like with you growing up first. Let's talk about the childhood. Like, did you grow up playing football? What was the household like? Did you have siblings or parents that played football as well? Were you a multi-sport athlete? Those are the types of things I kind of want to unpack right now, just to get a feel for when you began loving the sport of football.
Man, I got you. So for me, I started loving the sport of football at the age of 9 years old. But prior to that, I was born in Galveston, Texas. I mean, the only reason why I was born in Galveston, Texas is because my mother had complications with her pregnancy. My mother had lupus, but I was raised in Houston. So living in Houston till I was about 4 years old, me and my mother, we moved to California when I was 4, moved into San Bernardino County with my auntie. And as soon as my mom got her income tax check, we had moved into our own place in Rialto, California. And that's where I stayed all the way till I was about 9 years old. And so, stayed all the way until I was, got to the University of Utah. And we're going to have another special guest, which is my daughter.
I love it. Special guest in the house.
Another special guest in the house. But growing up for me, we lived off of Section 8 food stamps, different welfare programs because my mother was sick. And so she wasn't able to work. And at the beginning of my life, I didn't have my father in my life early on, in and out of jail, on and off of drugs. And so for me, growing up, I had to learn how to be that man in the house. And so, my family growing up, they thought I was going to be too introverted, because I clung to my mother because she was ill. And so at the age of 9 years old, I was blessed with a stepfather who I called my pops, who introduced me into a new light. And so that new light began to get me outside of the house. I have siblings. I have 3 stepbrothers and 1 stepsister. But for me, I only know really 2 stepbrothers and 1 stepsister. I guess I'm the middle child, as our merged families. But my stepfather taught me a lot as far as the discipline and the work ethic. And so at the age of 9 years old, that's when I picked up the game of football. I still remember my first practice out there. I was on the sideline catching the passes with my uncle and watching the kids play. And I just remember the coach from afar saying, like, whatever it is you're going through at home, leave it all out here on this field today. And for some reason, I just connected with that. And, after practice, how they huddle up and they come together, the coaches and the players, they disperse. And then me and my uncle, we continued to throw like passes to each other. And I just remember 2 of the coaches coming up and was like, who's this kid? And they was talking about me because I was just snagging everything. I had natural hands. And I remember the coaches was talking to my uncle about, how can he play? How can we get him on our team? And my uncle was like, well, his mom is low income. She's not able to play. And then it was like, bump that. We want this kid. And so that was the first time in my life that someone was willing to take a chance on me and like sponsor me in order to play for football. And so, that vehicle of football took me on until, high school. Early on, I was battling between, should I play basketball or should I play football? And in my freshman year in high school, my pops, he had a conversation with me. It was like, hey, right now you 6'1", 6'2", you play the post in basketball. If you look at the NBA, what's the average height? And I was like, about 6'8", 6'9". He was like, I love you, but you're not going to be that height. You kind of have, my style was more of like a slasher, have, decent ball skills. I wasn't a great shooter. I was a great defender. I was able to rebound. But he said, look, you 6'2". You're going to grow a couple more inches. So I ended up being a 6'3". So you're going to grow a couple inches. You're going to be about 180, 190 once you get to the end of your high school. If I'm you, I would think about playing football. And so for me, and my daughter, she gives me notes. And so for me, that decision of playing football turned out to be the best decision ever in my life. And since then, since that freshman year of high school, I quit basketball. The basketball coach was mad at me. He was like, man, we want him to play basketball. But that decision of just going all out on football, obviously I did track in the off season, but that decision of going out on football, allowed me to, play on varsity my freshman year. And in my sophomore year, I was a starter. I was playing tight end, and I had a really good season, a good enough season to where at the end of that season, I was ranked ESPN top 150 in the whole nation. Right. And then so going into my junior year, I was getting a lot of buzz, getting a lot of exposure because I went to a Nike camp where Matt Barkley was the quarterback. And there was like Alshon Jeffrey. I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. There's like big names like Alshon Jeffrey and so forth. And they labeled me a special talent, a guy that's rising up. And so that like literally ascended my career because of that exposure I got going to those camps and stuff like that. And so going into my senior year, it was a 4-star recruit, ranked number 34 in the nation. And I wound up committing to the University of Utah at the age of 16. I just felt like I needed something different, get outside the box that I was in, because I told you I was in Section 8 housing. You know, the environment wasn't great. The only people I ever interacted with were people that looked like me. And so I needed to learn how to diversify my language and be comfortable with speaking to people outside of my lane or outside of what I'm privy to on a day-to-day. And so that decision, my mom was, peed off at first. She was like, "You're leaving me." And I'm like, no, this is what's best for us. And my stepfather was like, "Hey, this is the time where he gets to leave and become a man and like kind of grow." And so, that journey right there paid dividends for me as I transitioned on to Utah. But, my time, as an adolescent, my pops teaching me about discipline, my mother teaching me about never giving up, never quitting, no matter what adversity or obstacle you're going through, right? That guided me in the right direction. And then my younger brother gave me the motivation to keep going because someone's always watching me behind. And then my older brother taught me how to be tough, right? Because he was out there in the neighborhoods protecting me, and he told me always be tough. And so those are some core lessons that I learned, like growing up in my adolescence, that translated onto the football field to become the special talent that I ultimately became, as people quoted me on. And so, I was privileged. I had a great system around me to help, mold me to the person I am today.
Yeah, man. What a story though. Like, holy cow. And what's cool, what I'm seeing here as you're talking is like you were given opportunities. I'm a big believer. I believe in God, and I believe he's playing chess, not checkers. And like you mentioned something that kind of stood out to me right there. Like your pops, right? Mm-hmm. Stepdad comes into your life and kind of provides an opportunity. I believe that's one of those moves in chess. Like he's like, putting people in your place, putting like steps and steps ahead of where you might think you might end up. You're younger at the time, but the Lord knows what the plans are that he has for you. That at least that's my belief. And I see that at least in your story. And for those who might think differently and believe differently, that's fine. I just believe that you took advantage of the opportunities that were presented to you. Like I think that's really cool. It's a super important piece of it, in my opinion. And I am curious though, because being from Texas, and you mentioned Section 8 housing, and you mentioned just the culture and everything. University of Utah is in Salt Lake City. Okay, like, and listen, man, I'm from Idaho, and my family's in Salt Lake. So like and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which pretty much kind of fits the mold over there, right? But even I sometimes have a hard time in Salt Lake City. So like that's where I'm like, man, like, wow. Okay, so I am curious. When you go to campus over there, what was the big, like, you can be honest, but like, what was the biggest shock, like, I guess, so to speak? What was maybe it wasn't a shock, but what's the biggest transition for you going from your current situation in Texas and all the things you were used to then Salt Lake City, Utah?
For me, the biggest transition was getting accustomed to not having a black coach. That was the biggest decision, biggest culture shock, because throughout my time in Little League, middle school, high school, the only coaches I ever had was an African-American coach. I never was coached differently. And all my teams has been minority, all that. And so going to the University of Utah, what I didn't realize was that culture shift of like, they teach, it's just different things in the way they carry themselves, stuff like that. But, I felt so comfortable with my wide receiver coach, Coach Roderick, to the point where at that point, it didn't matter, because the way he grooms kids and teaches kids about, certain things. And so that I would say initially that was my biggest concern. It's like, I'm going from a place where I've only been coached by this type of culture going to this. And so, but that was the biggest thing for me. But going in, the diversity of the team, we had, like, at that time it was like 1/3 Polynesian, 1/3 white, 1/3 black. And so it allowed me to kind of like get more of a bigger view or bigger picture of the things that's outside of the norm that I'm used to. And that's what allowed me to blossom and grow. Obviously, I had difficulties in the beginning because there's certain things I just didn't understand. But as I grew older, I learned a lot, and I'm appreciative for every moment of it. That's for sure. But it was definitely a culture shock. I'm not gonna lie, culture shock for sure, and even a season shock, because we don't have 4 seasons in California. The weather's pretty beautiful. But when I went out there, in my first winter out there, I was like, man, I'm trying to go back home. Like, it was cool the first couple of days, never experienced snow. But after that black ice start to hit, people start falling on the ground. Like, it's different. It's so practicing in the snow. I was like, oh yeah, this is crazy. So, but other than that, man, things were great, man. I appreciated every moment.
Dude, I relate, and I'm from up here, dude. It's literally okay, you're familiar with Utah, so like Idaho and Utah are like the exact same. Like that's
Yep.
basically what it is. We're like basically the exact same weather-wise, everything. Culture is pretty similar. I would actually argue Utah is more diverse than Idaho, and for the similar reasons of what you just said. But it's I hate the weather. I'm born and raised here. I hate it, dude. I hate the weather. And if I could afford to live in like nicer areas like San Diego, California, I'd be there in a heartbeat. Like, I just hate the weather, man. The 4 seasons, everyone's like, oh, but you got to be grateful for it. I'm like, yeah, I am. But like,
Man,
I'll tell you what, I don't enjoy it. Like,
yeah.
So you mentioned Matt Barkley and you mentioned Alshon Jeffrey. So, dude, those are like, you said Barkley, right? Am I hearing that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I want people to know, like, especially the youth that are listening to this. You might not know these names because you were probably too young to realize what's going on. Those are some, like, dude, Matt Barkley, stud. Alshon Jeffrey's arguably one of the better wide receivers of his era. And he kind of, no one really talks about him anymore about like what he was able to accomplish. Dude was a monster, absolute monster. So to have your name be mentioned as a high up, like a standout, like that type of name from them and their kid, like that is something to be proud of. And I think it's super sick.
Man, it's another thing. It was crazy because I was an underclassman. Like, and they were seniors at that time, and I'm just coming up. And so, like, for my name to be in the same article as them, like, and being highlighted as a special talent, that was huge. And so, another thing I forgot to mention, which I try to tell kids nowadays, is you got to strike when the iron's hot. And when it came to me, I understood because I learned from my pops. He told me, like, you have to learn how to sell and market yourself. And once I learned that as a sophomore, I was ESPN top 150. It was like, cool. There's a lot of people that are great, right? And they're still stuck in their community. What you need to do is now open that market up and send your stuff all out. So what I did was, and once I knew I was ESPN top 150, I gathered a list of all the Division I schools. I got all the coaches' information, all the contact information, and literally from there, it was a sales game for me. Weekly and bi-weekly, I'm calling every coach. I'm emailing every coach. We're sending like DVDs. Like, this is back when we didn't have the internet with like YouTube and stuff. I'm sending DVDs. We're sending letters. Like, we're doing all the things to get my marketability up and to sell me on the different colleges. And by doing that, I remember my first scholarship offer was from the University of Tennessee. Like, Philip Fulmer came in a fax machine. And so, like, my pops just ingrained into me, like, once you understand your product and you know your target audience, you have to make sure that you sell and market yourself out there to create the opportunities that you need to be created so that you can have a seat at the table to be able to select where you want to go and accept it. And so early on, that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned, throughout my journey in sports that I can even take on in life too.
Oh, heck yeah, man. And I'm glad you shared that. I have kids, I coach basketball, and usually it's the seniors. I coach club basketball, so we travel. And I have kids hit me up after the season's over, senior year in high school. Hey, coach, do you know, like, who's looking for people and stuff? Like, could I send my stuff over to this? What are they looking for in an email? I'm like, bro, like, you should have been doing this a long time ago, because at this point they've got their rosters set and they've been recruiting for a while. You've got to market yourself. And I think that's one of the things I think you could really help people with too. And just this story as a whole, like, you were a top athlete still doing that.
Yep.
These other athletes that are kind of the, middle of the pack, bottom tier kind of stuff that could still play at the next level. Maybe it's JUCO, D2, who knows? But like they have to do it a lot more. Like they gotta have a sense of urgency, so to speak. And I think that's awesome that you were able to do that. Even with your name in the top 150, you're like, okay, well, now I got to start putting it out there. Like, I've got to do some work. Huge life lesson right there. Huge.
And to even add on to it, man, my step pops, because I knew that the only way I was going to get to college is if it was for free. Like, we didn't have the funds in order to pay for college. So like, my work ethic and my dedication and my commitment, like, I had to make sure I stayed true to it. And so, like, to add on to that, like, one of the things that I did too is I had to look at the roster. So if I was a junior, I would look at, okay, if I was a junior in high school, I knew I had 2 more years to complete. So what I would do is I would, like, foreshadow as far as, okay, let me look at their rosters, look at the juniors, because those are going to be the people that they're going to want to place in the future. By the time I'm a senior, they're going to be seniors, and they're going to be looking at, that's how many scholarship opportunities is available. So then I would filter it out to see, okay, who has the most need at this position? And then I will really attack them heavily, because I knew that this school needs 4 receivers and this school needs 1. So why am I spending so much time to try to get that 1 when this school needs 4? Like, so I start filtering it out like that. And so it was just very strategic. And I credit my pops in regards to like how to go about that thing, because he really, it's so weird. He made me think as a business, or like as an entrepreneur, when I was 14, 15, 16, and like it's engraved in me still.
Oh, dude, totally. That's what I literally was just going to use that word. You were an entrepreneur before you were even like in college playing football, you know what I mean? And after the sport was over too. And then you just said that. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Checks out now, right? Like, cause we'll get to that point here in a little bit, but like, it's cool. That's so awesome to hear. Now, Kenneth, when you get to U of U, that's a pretty dominant school. I mean, they're good. They're good at football. You're over there. You mentioned a culture shock, but I want to ask you this question: as being one of the top 150, one of the top 40 or 50 players in your position in the country, for that matter, like as far as overall, like you're going to a D1 school, what was the physicality like? What did you have any kind of, you being a top athlete, did you ever notice any differences in physicality going into college, or did you kind of fit in? Was there any kind of transition that way that you needed to like adjust to?
For me, I was fortunate, or I am fortunate, because I'm a bigger receiver. So out of high school, I was 6'3", 192. So there's some pros that's not even that size, you know? So I was fortunate in a way to where physically I'm able to handle whatever comes at me. And so that's why I was able to ramp up or expedite the process of me being able to play early. So I was coming in, they were looking at me to play like right away, which I was on that trajectory. And about 2 weeks from the first game, we were in fall camp. I was slated as second string, but receivers, we rotated every couple plays. So it's basically like a starter. And in my career, I started literally full-time or part-time in every year. So I never not played. And so the 2 weeks before the first game, it was at the end of fall camp. We were in this drill called speed and space. And what speed and space is, you have a ball carrier versus a defender that's about maybe 5-10 yards away from you. I catch the ball. I try to make a move on the defender to score in the end zone. And as I'm making my move, I stiff arm him, and I stiff arm him into my ankle and tore all the ligaments out of my ankle, right? And so that was probably the hardest, like situation for me, because I never had to deal with an injury to the point where I needed surgery. And so like for me, physically, I was good, but it was more of the mental aspect of everything that I had to overcome during my career in college that I never had to experience in high school. And so I would say for me, the biggest thing when you're transitioning from one stage to another, or one field to another, one level to another, for me, it's the mental game that you have to overcome.
Man, and you just said the injury thing, and you kind of answered one of my questions, but I want to talk about it for a second, because I like to ask athletes that have gone through that for a little advice. I never experienced a major injury until I was 28 years old, right? So like I was never competing in this level that you were, but it was my shoulder, right? And I'd never had like surgery on a thing until I ripped my shoulder out. And I just know from the time, like the mental grind it was, like, I mean, just as a older dude who's washed up now, but like I was going through rehab on there to try to get my shoulder back. I mean, there were days where I thought I wasn't going to move my arm again. I literally had convinced myself that my arm wasn't going to ever move again, because it was like stuck. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And they could hardly move it the first couple of weeks, and that's just part of the process I've learned. But I thought I wasn't going to move my arm again. And then I started going to the spiral of like mental health. I was depressed. They've got me hyped up on pain meds, which I do not advise. I hate them now because of that. And my head's all messed up. Like 4 months, man. So for an athlete like yourself, who's in the, like, I mean, this is, you're a freshman, you're going in there ready to play just a couple weeks out, boom, mentally. So now that you had gone through it, and you mentioned that was a grind, I guess, what advice could you give, Kenneth, to ask athletes that have done this before? They're going through an injury and they're not expecting it. They don't know what to do now, and they're experiencing the mental grind. How did you get through it, or what advice would you give now, having done that?
Yeah, fortunately for me, I had to experience it twice. So the first one, which I mentioned, was my freshman year, and it was painful, right? To have to go through knowing that you can be out there, but you can't. And then also me, the background that I came from, I understood that this may be the only vehicle that I can get to be able to have some type of funds to be able to support my mother on the back end. Like that's how it felt for me. And so I felt like a lot of the stuff was on my shoulders. And so initially I was out of it. I was depressed. And my wide receiver coach, Coach Roderick, I'm forever grateful for him, simply because like in those moments where I felt depressed, like he took me into and let me stay with him in his house. And like at his house, he had like in Utah, you guys have basements, and the basement was like another home. And so he allowed me to stay in his basement, which was like another home, until I was able to get all rehabbed up. And during that process, my man would feed me every day, feed me every like lunch, breakfast, dinner, anything to make sure I wasn't like mentally capped out and I wanted to go back home. Like, and so I probably like my wide receiver coach did that for me tremendously. Like the process, he made sure I was good. And so I knew since I was only a freshman that I still had years to be able to, still accomplish this dream. But my second injury was the injury that shifted everything for me, because it was 2013. I was going to be a junior. And this season was supposed to be the season where, this is the breakout year. This is the year that it could potentially it'd be big enough to where I can possibly leave college early. That's the capacity in the year that we had, simply because we were about to receive a Hall of Fame coach in Dennis Erickson, who was going to be calling plays. And typically in his schematic and his scheme, the receivers, they all propelled. All of them had over 1,000 yards. All of them just did really well. And the year prior, I was coming off a good season where people were like, man, who is this kid? Like he's 6'3", 216. He's making plays. Like showing crazy athletic ability. Like my name was getting some buzz. And so much so that agents were reaching out to me, like leading up to the season, like, hey, man, all these things are working in your favor. Like this is going to be a good year. And so 2013, first game of the year, 9 plays into it. I'm on the left side of the formation in the slot, and we call it pass play, right? And so my running back, he flanks out to the left, he catches the pass, and I'm in front of him getting ready to lock up with a defender to block. My running back gets tackled, and he lands on my ankle and tears all the ligaments out in my other ankle that I hurt previously, and broke my fibula with it. And so I'm just sitting there on the floor like, nah, this can't be. Nah, not again. And so that injury, like, was the one where it set me off to the point where a lot of stuff could have gone wrong. A lot of stuff. And luckily for me, I had a good support system, and my girlfriend at the time, which is my wife now, and she made me see the bigger picture outside of sports. Like, she let me know that, hey, there's this other vehicle that you can use outside of this primary vehicle that can still get you your end destination. And so for any athlete out there that may be going through any circumstances where, it's huge. Like, you thinking like, man, this is going to be it. Like, just know, like, you got to have, like, obviously your mental has to be good, but you also have to have a good support system around you that can be able to keep you up. Right. Because if it wasn't for my wife during that time, I probably would have clocked out. Honestly, I'd have been like, man, what the HE double hockey sticks? Like, I'm done with this. Because having her around me, I was able to complete my degree and then move on to another degree. And then I was more out there in the community. I would be out there at detention centers, suicide prevention groups, gang prevention groups. I'll be talking to elementary, middle school, high school. I'm out everywhere in the community. So much so that I just received and was coined the nickname Batman, the Dark Knight. Like, it was during that transition. Everybody called me the Dark Knight. And one of the biggest blessings that I had on my journey that kind of like made me certain of, who I was and like my story leading up to it was 2014, and we was at a fan fest. And for people who don't know what a fan fest is where all the fans, they come to the stadium, get autographs, take pictures with, all the different sports teams. And so while we're at Fan Fest, there's his mom and there's his son, this little kid, he's about maybe in elementary, middle school range. And he comes up and he gets, some autographs from me, like on a t-shirt and a helmet. And he looks up at me and says, "Thank you, Batman." And so I'm thinking like he's just saying thank you for, me signing his stuff. And he was like, "No, thank you because of your situation and knowing how much that season meant to you, it helped me out in my situation." Because everybody heard like, "Man, this is supposed to be a big breakout season for K. Scott. This is it for him." Whoa, whoa, whoa. And he said, "Because of your situation and how you fought through it and knowing how much that means to you, like your story helped me overcome cancer." Right. And so that hit me hard. I'm like, man. So every day now I got to walk with the zeal, like, man, like I have to be certain with myself to the point where like, I'm not just doing this just for me. Like I have to model and show people that, yeah, I've been faced with some adversity. I've been faced with some opposition. I've been faced with some challenges. However, we're going to overcome it. And this is the way we're going, and this is how we're going to overcome it. And so I'm just blessed that even though despite, my injuries, right, I was still able to overcome them. And in the process of me overcoming them, it was an example for others to keep on pushing through. And so I know I just gave a whole spiel, but man, like I feel like a Baptist preacher, like on a Sunday, like I just keep rolling.
No, I love it. No, this is great. That's what we need. We need this energy, dude, because it's so helpful. Because like, you're an athlete, you hurt yourself your freshman year, come back, you're doing okay. It's about to be a breakout year. And somehow freak accident happens and it's a bad one. And one thing I keep taking from what you're saying, and you mentioned a couple of times, is your support system. Earlier, you talked about your pops and you talked about your step siblings, you talked about your mother and the support system that you had and like coaches and so forth. That you've referenced coaches again, your coach at Utah, your now wife, like the support system can be huge for anybody at any situation. So I would actually encourage the athletes, that are listening to this and the parents that are listening to this to remember that, like, surround yourself with positive people. Cause like when you get into a dark time, sometimes, it might not have happened to you. I don't know. But like for me, you find out who your friends are. Like when I was kind of depressed with my shoulder injury, I had gained a lot of weight. I gained like 40 pounds and it was nasty. I just didn't feel right about myself. I felt gross. I was having a hard time working because like I wasn't fully alert at work. I was trying to finish up college, all this stuff. Dude, I was like depressed. And, I found out who my real friends were at the time too, who was reaching out, who was actually checking in on me, stuff like that. And luckily I had my wife, or else something bad probably would have happened. So, yeah, man, like I love that. I love the support system thing. That's one of the things I'm taking away from this. And then just taking advantage of the things and finding a different purpose, like, or a bigger purpose to go along with what you're already doing. It's just like those avenues that, again, I think the Lord's playing chess, not checkers. I think he's just like, okay, you're going to come back. He knew you were going to come back and be able to play a little bit, but like,
right.
He also knew there was something bigger outside of football too. And he's trying to show you those things. Right. So that's pretty cool to me. Okay. Rice Eccles. I've only been there one time for a game. It was a 2005, 2006 game with Boise State and U of U. I'm a Boise State grad. I'm a Buckeyes fan from Ohio State, but I'm a Boise State grad. So I like Boise State as well. I know, dude. And I was there when Gerald Alexander took the head off of one of the guys that was there. It's like a famous thing on a little sweep pass, whatever, to the outside or run. And he just drills him from the safety position. Helmet flies off. But Rice Eccles is actually one of my favorite stadiums. As far as how, like, it's not the biggest stadium, but it's loud. And I like where it's located. And I like kind of the scenery and everything. So I'm curious, like, what's your thoughts on Rice Eccles? And then what was your favorite game that you competed in that stadium?
Oh, that's tough. The one thing I love about Rice Eccles, though, is, like you mentioned, it may be small, but they're super mighty. And our student section is crazy. Like, they get after it, man. And then also from our mutts, that's what we call them. Like, even there's a north end zone. Like, all these end zones in different zones, they fight each other not fight like physically, but fight against each other. Like, who's going to be the loudest? Like, who can represent more? And it's so cool because you can see and feel the energy within the stadium because of that. Like, they're all trying to be the loudest that they could possibly be to help the team push to win. But as far as my favorite game in Rice Eccles, oh my gosh. Personally, I would have to say, the biggest game would have to be in Arizona State. just from a statistic standpoint, obviously I had a big game that game, over 100 yards receiving. I even had an ESPN top 10 play. It was ranked number 2. It was a one-handed catch in the rain. It was like 40, 50-yard catch down the sideline. And so that would probably have to be my biggest moment. And not only just for me statistically, but also for my quarterback. Like, my quarterback was my best friend, Travis Wilson. And so that game for him helped him out too, because prior to they were just talking about, my quarterback, he had a blood, something in regards to his brain, to where like it could possibly be like season or career ending. And so he was battling back with that. And the game prior, it was an off game for us. And so there was a lot of negativity going on. And so this game, because of his passing ability, he was able to will us through and win the game. Obviously, I had a great game, but my quarterback, he was able to have the highlights and things of that nature because of his talent and his arm, displaying on the field. And so I would say Arizona State game, and we were number 4 or 5 in the country at that time. So it was just overall a good feeling.
Man, like that, I'm thinking back of these times. I know, who you're talking. Like, Wilson was nasty, and one of the things about that quarterback, by the way, your boy, his visor. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker. If you got a visor, dude, he looked dope, dude. Like,
he swag, man.
Dude, he did. He had swag. I always respected that. And here's a fun fact, right? So I told you, like, I got family in Utah. You think I'd fit the part, but I hate BYU. That's the funny thing. Everyone's like, "What? You remember the same? What?" And I'm like, "No, I hate BYU. I always hated BYU. Like, when Boise State plays BYU, it's always a fight for me with the fans. Hate it. And so I always root for Utah. I'm like, if I'm going to root for any school out of Utah, it's U of U. And so, like, I've actually, oddly enough, paid a lot of attention to, like, the Utes, man. So Wilson was actually one of my favorite guys to watch. And I will say that stadium is pretty nasty. I gotta go check out the highlights of the Arizona State game, though.
It was a back and forth game. It was a sick game. You definitely gonna have to try it out and look back at it. It was a back and forth game down to the wire. I don't want to spoil the ending, but I'm gonna spoil the ending. D. Booker basically took the run to the distance, and that kind of opened up the game for us to win. But it was down to the wire in the rain. It was a great. You have to look at the highlights.
What year was that one?
2015. Okay,
who was playing quarterback at Arizona State at that time? That wasn't Taylor Kelly.
Berkovich something.
Okay, something. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, dude. So were you there, K. Scott, during the transition from to the Pac-12? Were you there during that transition? So how was that transition in competition? Were you guys pretty hyped going there, like shifting that thing up?
That was one of the selling points, actually, for me to going to Utah. I wanted to be a part of something that was going to be a part of something much bigger. And so when I was getting recruited, Utah was in the Mountain West, and freaking my first year as a freshman, I was out because I was injured. But we went to a bowl game. We played against Boise State, and we lost. That's when Boise State had freaking Titus Young, Austin.
Oh, yeah, I was at that game. It was the Vegas Bowl, man. I was there.
Woo! Hey, them boys was beast. I said, yeah. I was a fan of theirs because I love Austin Pettis and I love Titus Young. Like, as far as their duo, I was like, oh, man, this team is immaculate. And then the QB, oh, my God, he was.
Ellen's the man, dude.
Oh, my God. Man. Immaculate. But, yes, that transition was amazing because it allowed me to play against the schools that, obviously, being from California, you admire. You know what I'm saying? So it's like playing against the USC, playing in the Coliseum, playing in the Rose Bowl, playing in Autzen Stadium. Those are the games or the teams that you admire because you grew up watching them. You know what I'm saying? And so I have an interesting story, too, kind of going with just the whole Pac-12 thing. So in high school, I went to a Rising Stars camp, and the Rising Stars camp is for USC. And so I did really well, so much so that Pete Carroll brought me in the office and told me and verbally gave me a scholarship. And so during that year, they had wanted 3 receivers. And earlier, I was discussing how every team has a certain need in regards to how many people they're wanting to bring in as far as recruits. And so they needed 3 receivers at that time. And they had 2 committed, Kyle Prater and Robert Woods. And so during the transition, Pete Carroll leaves, Lane Kiffin is assumed to be the guy. and he brings his receiver that was committed to Tennessee to USC, which took up the third spot. So now I don't have an offer anymore. You get what I'm saying? Because they already filled up. And so that's another thing for the recruits that they don't think about. It's like once these colleges get their numbers, the scholarship that you once had, you no longer have anymore. You get what I'm saying?
Wow,
So that was a quick story about that in regards to the Pac-12 and just, just in general. But like during my time in the Pac-12 play, man, I enjoyed every single moment, man. I just loved relishing those moments because it took me back to when I was a kid, watching them on TV and stuff like that.
Oh, I bet, man. And dude, that's crazy. That's the stuff that like people don't think about, the intricacies of the game as far as scholarships, everything. Like you just mentioned the whole Lane Kiffin thing, bringing his guys over. Like it's like, oh yeah, dude, like it's like a new boss, a new CEO comes in and they're bringing in their COO and they're bringing in their VP of marketing and they're bringing in stuff. Yeah, dude, it changes things up. That's crazy. I'm going to encourage those listening, rewind that and make sure you take note of that. I mean, it's not going to happen to everyone, but these days in the landscape of college athletics, there's a lot of change between coaches, players in the transfer portal. I mean, there's so much movement now, NIL deals, so forth. Like it could change on a dime. So just remember that type of stuff. Like that plays a role in recruiting.
And then another thing to add on in the role of recruiting, I know we're kind of going off on a tangent, but like if you think about it, if a school has, let's say they need 2 spots, like for a receiver, they're not going to just offer 2 kids. They're going to offer about 10, 15 in order to make sure that those 2 spots get filled. So even though these kids, you see kids, well, I got 60 offers, I got 30 offers. Well, the later you commit to a school, the smaller amount of those, the higher chance of those scholarships that you once had are now being taken away because kids are committing to these schools, taking those spots for you. You get what I'm saying? So, like, I want kids to know that too. Even though they have 3 receivers that they're looking to fill, they're offering about 20 of them. So your relationship with those coaches is super important because if you have a better relationship with that one coach, they may wait for you to think about wanting to commit and holding off other scholarships for you. So that's why it's important to go in there, build a relationship, sell on value of why you are or should be taking in those spots and things of that nature too. So that's another big lesson that I learned, when it came to recruitment. It's like, you're not the only one that they offer. They offer about 10 more people too. And all of them are looking to play that spot.
Yeah, they're talking to everybody. That's great advice. Man, this is crazy, Kenneth, because I'm like, dude, you were part of that squad that was at the Mako Las Vegas Bowl. Like literally, I'll tell you right now, I was so mad that season. That's when we ended up losing to Nevada, Boise State, I'm saying. Lost to Nevada. Yeah. We were at the game in Reno. All right, my buddy Kyle Brotzman was the kicker. I've had him on the show. I grew up with Kyle and everything. So Kyle misses the kick, and there's the whole spiel about it. We lose to Colin Kaepernick. Yeah. So essentially, we get put into the Las Vegas Bowl, and they did the best they could by putting a top 10 matchup, or pretty close to top 10 matchup between the 2 teams. But like, here's the kicker: we had saved up all our money. We were broke college students at the time. I had just gotten home from a church mission, so like I didn't have no money, dude. I was like freaking just trying to make myself like make a living, whatever. Yeah. So we had saved this money to go to the Rose Bowl, assuming we were going to make it to the Rose Bowl, right? Which TCU ended up going to. Yeah. And so we had all this money, and at the time, Vegas was like pennies on the dollar, dude. It was like $28 a night to stay on the strip in the middle of the winter. So like we're heading down there for basically nothing, right? And so it was like a amazing trip because we had all this surplus in cash and we were just having a good time. Yeah. But I was so bummed about that game because we won, but one, your quarterback was hurt. Yeah. And 2, it was raining. It was like it was pouring rain. I'm like, man, I really wish it was like fully healthy squads, both sides around, because man, it could have been nasty. It was fun still. You guys got into a little scuffle that one, huh? Yeah.
Sure did. I remember that. I was like, oh, dang. I said, whoa, this is great. The primetime TV right here.
Dude, that was good. That's funny. You were on. It's crazy going flashback almost 14 years ago now, 13 and a half years ago, because I literally was there. That's crazy. As you look back on your football career, okay, Scott, as far as like the ups and downs, the injuries, the cool places you got to play, one, I want to know, who was a player you played against, like a defender maybe, that you had to go up against, whether it was a corner, a safety, whomever, maybe it was a linebacker. Who was the best defender you had to face, and what did you learn from facing them?
Dang. Shoot, that's super tough. Oh, man. I think, man, Dang, that's tough. I think Washington, they had some beast at corner. Like Marcus Peters was one of them, and Desmond Trufant, or is it Desmond or Marcus? It was one of the Trufants was on the other side.
Yeah,
That
it
duo,
it's a true font. So yeah.
bro, that duo right there was crazy. What they taught me is like you have to. It don't matter how big you think you are, you gonna have to like technique wise. You're gonna have to be a master at your technique because they're gonna be right there at your hip every single pocket, like every single play. So technique wise, you have to be spot on. And then another duo that was tough to go against was UCLA. They had my homeboy and another guy at corner, and both of those corners were 6'3". And so I'm playing against corners my size. Like I'm not used to playing against corners that can look me in my eyes. I'm used to like having a size advantage against corners, right? And so that was the toughest thing for me because I had to learn how to like operate the game differently, like from from an advantage standpoint. Like no longer am I just going to bully this defender. Like I have to kind of like figure out different ways to have an advantage. Maybe I have to be a little quicker. Maybe I have to be more savvy. So like in those two situations, they taught me a lot when it came to like my opponent because on the Washington side, I had to be very technique driven because they were spot on. They were savages when it came to like technique and the athletic ability, understanding concepts and plays and schemes, diving in on them. Like it was just tough. And then on the other hand, I had another team that was just physical, like a physical specimens. Like you're on the ball lined up, they're right there in your face, same size as you, long arms and everything. And they actually both were fast too. So it's like, dang, what advantage can I have against them? So those two scenarios were pretty tough. But and it's not to say like the other corners I went against was like slouches, but like those scenarios played the hardest part because of the different advantages they had.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. It's cool to hear. And I guess you have to prepare differently for each one of those types of matchups too. Like you just, if you're trying to compete at the highest level, you're going to have to find ways, like you said, to get an advantage on, and then you'll have to shift that up depending on who you're playing. I think one thing that I would share for the younger athletes, whatever sport you might be competing in, is, yeah, right now when you're in high school, sometimes your athleticism can give you an advantage just depending on what state you play in and what conference you're in, what division you're in, whatever. But like when you get to different levels of your sport, that's not going to work. You're going to have to learn how to adjust accordingly to certain things. And that's where I see a lot of really good athletes that might not be well polished in certain skills, but they're just really athletic. They filter out, like, and they fizzle out, I should say, when they get to college. Even at the junior college level, I'll see great athletes that are like a year or two later, they're done playing sports. Like, yeah, it wasn't for me. And it's because they never really were able to polish up those other things. And I think that's important to learn that, right?
Dude, that's super key. You cannot be a one-trick pony. And I'll tell you even more. So, like, if you're a one-trick pony, like, for instance, my situation, every year that I was there at Utah, we had a different offensive coordinator. So that means that's a different scheme every year. And so if you're a one-trick pony and you don't have value in that new offensive scheme, you're going to find yourself out of position. And so, like, you have to figure out, okay, well, you can't just lean on one thing, but you have to like really develop your whole entire game so that no matter what scheme that comes in, you'll be able to find a role and be able to get in and play. And so that's why one thing I always tell people is like diversify your skill sets. Like, yes, you can have some things that you're strong at, but also you got to understand like how to be able to be adaptable to any scheme that they put you in, so that you can be able to play. Because if you're a one-trick pony, it ain't gonna work for you.
That's such important information. So thank you for that. K. Scott, as you got out of college and you started to kind of transition into the business world, talk about what your next steps were when college ended and you're trying to figure out, like, you know, what's next? Is football going to continue? Like, do I go into the business world? What were the next steps so that we can kind of hear the lessons that you took from football and you know, went into the next steps of life?
Yeah, like, so for me, I had the opportunity with the Los Angeles Rams for a little bit. And then I got released because I failed my physical.
Oh, really? Okay.
My prior injuries, and my report said a C-. And then I remember getting a call from Jeff Fisher. It was the first year in LA. And it was like, hey, you're a great talent, obviously, investment wise, looking at your body, things of that nature. So they had to release me. And then months later, I signed with the CFL with the Montreal Alouettes, went to training camp. I was injured there, so I wasn't able to really pursue my full value. And in the CFL, they only can take a certain amount of Americans. So if you don't do more than just your position, you're going to be on a short leash. And for me, since I was injured, I only focused on wide receiver and didn't have any other value outside of wide receiver to play on special teams, to play different positions within receiver. I was let go. And so I got to a point in my life, it was the spring of 2017. Yeah, it was spring of 2017 where I just got released from the CFL. I had no income because I didn't make an active roster. At that time, my mom passed away, which was the driving force for why I wanted to play sports. So now I don't even know if I want to play football anymore at all. And then during that time, too, I was about to be a father. I was about to have my oldest, who, pops up in this video that you guys see probably here and there. And so those situations hit me at a point where I was like, holy moly. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this happened a year later, this happened a year later. Like, literally within that month or two span, everything hit me. So I no longer am Kenneth Scott, the football player. Who am I? I no longer have the drive or the want to want to even not only just possess like football, but shoot, even life, right? Because that's my mom. That's the person who I went through everything with, the things I was doing things for. And then also, I was having a baby, like not having a father, like my real father in my life, like being in and out of jail, on and off of drugs. I was like, man, I got to make sure I'm there for mine. And so kind of going back to that support system, I had that. My wife, she was there for me during that time. No matter, even though during that time I was checked out, like everything hit me at once, I was checked out. So my wife was there to support me. Family members, like I moved in with my grandmother out here in Houston. That's how I moved out here to Houston. But prior to me moving out here in Houston, my scholarship donors from the University of Utah, who I call my family, they allowed me to live with them for a bit to get back on my feet. And then obviously I transitioned to Oregon a little bit with my wife's family. And so, during my journey, a lot of individuals did a lot of things for me so that I can be able to stand on my own feet. If it wasn't for them, I would have failed. But transitioning outside of sports into the next thing, I had to figure out, like, what are my strengths? Like, what are some things that I can, like, that are about me that I can pursue, that I still love to do. And so for me, the first thing I did was I knew I wanted to help people. And so I moved into a nonprofit role where I was a case manager at a domestic violence shelter. And so my job was to provide resources to all the women who experienced domestic violence in an intimate partner relationship and to get them back on their feet. And then from there, I moved on to a fatherhood program where I helped individuals who was incarcerated, homeless, basically who didn't have any foundation. I helped them get back on their feet, where it was jobs, teaching about healthy parenting, healthy relationships, financial literacy, things of that nature, making sure they get onto their feet. And then as I progressed in my journey, I remember getting a LinkedIn message from a sales director for a Fortune 40 company asking me, like, hey, have you ever thought about sales? And I was like, I never thought about sales as a career. However, I know how to sell. And I just told him the story of when I was a recruit and how I had to sell myself as me as the product and things of that nature. So he was like, I'm sold. I want you on my team. So I moved into corporate sales, did really well in the top 1% in corporate sales. And I learned the foundational premises of everything, of how to be a consultant. And then from there, I moved into, like, man, I got this sales background. I know how to work with people. Now let me figure out, like, what's my product that I can push. And so that's how I got into, like, wanting to speak at different places, pushing that product, understanding who was my audience to speak to, how to sell and market myself. So I've been speaking for a while now. And now I'm with the nonprofit program to where they wanted me to build a program to address a certain demographic, and they want me to scale it. Right. And so it's like, now I'm like merging my background in sales and my background in helping people and the services into one. And so now we have a program to where we help individuals who have created harm in a relationship or presented harm in a relationship, right, in a domestic violence situation. We're helping them get back on their feet in accountability and rehabilitation, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of people, they go through the educational premises, but while they're still on probation, they stop it. And so we want to fill that gap in, okay, after they get into in those BIT programs, which is battery intervention prevention programs, after they learn the knowledge, we want to stay with them the remainder of the time they're on probation, so that it can be a consistent like habit and nurturing of the education, so that the recidivism rate won't repeat, right? And so it's just teaching people how to have healthy relationships when it comes to that. So that's currently what I do. In addition to, I teach at Rice University. I teach critical thinking and sexuality, which is teaching about healthy relationships, bystander intervention, traumas, sexual violence, things of that nature, mainly for freshmen coming into transitioning into college to understand the nuances of it. And then also, I just got approved like a month ago, my own course, and it's called Intro to Brand Development. And it's aimed at, I reached out to the academic advisors in the athletic department at Rice University, and they're going to get as many student athletes into that course so I could teach them about the brand development. And so that's been exciting news for me, and something that I'm excited and can't wait to continue, because it's just an added on layer to the books that I wrote about helping athletes transition from one field to the next. And so that's currently where I'm at. I'm super excited about everything that is continuing on.
Man, isn't it crazy? Like, as I'm sitting here, I literally, when I grab my phone, when you're talking, I always do this. Like, I'll grab my phone, I get on my notepad, and I just start taking notes on my notepad of like certain things you say, right? So like, that's what I'm doing down here. I'm typing on my notes. It's so cool to see your story, because the little things you might have learned from your pops, right? Like you talked about earlier, how to be an entrepreneur when you're like 14, 15, 16 years old, like selling yourself, sales, selling yourself in the sense of like getting yourself out there to the coaches, right? That's what I mean by that. And then, you know, flash forward, you've gone through some adversity, go through it again after college is over, you know, a lot of adversity, you know, the football has ended, you know, the situation with your mother, all of this stuff comes crashing down all at once, seemingly, right? Well, isn't that crazy how life works, though? It's like everything seems to crash at once, right? And it's daunting, but again, we talk about support system and all this stuff. Sales, again, you get into sales, you understand all these skill sets that you had been acquiring earlier on, and hard work and dedication that you learned through sports, and all these little things have kind of reared their head again. Like, here they are, they're peeking out again. And now you're able to utilize that. I think it's so cool. It's just interesting hearing your story, how like in a different way, this stuff you were doing when you were 14, 15, 16 is now like here, you know, as you're older. And that's super cool. And the courses and everything. And like we talked about right before we were recording, like that's the stuff I geek out about. Like, I think it's super cool, and you have a massive opportunity. Right. But you mentioned the books. So like you're an author. Let's just we can't just like brush over that before we end. We have to like talk about how you wrote a book, or you wrote books. I saw it was a 6-time published author. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. So talk to us about the books, because you were talking about how it's helping. Well, one of them is like that I saw was the one what you just said, I guess, was like helping college athletes transition from one field to the next, is the terminology used. Can you talk to us about the books and where they can find them?
Yeah, so the first book, so all my books you can find on Amazon, but the first book, I'll speak about them individually. The first book was a memoir about my late mother. My mom, during the latter part of her life, she began writing in her journals. And so, because she had aspirations of becoming an author, obviously, since she passed away, she was never able to fulfill that. So I was like, wow, at her death, you know, I was able to get all her journals. And so literally I took those journals and I put it in, you know, basically this is what I tell people. I took her journals and I just added color to it. I took the black and white that's in the journal and I added color to it, to where the stories flow within each other. And it's a memoir about her. And it's called 24, My Life's Journey Through Being a Mom, Lupus, and a Kidney Transplant. So that's the first book that I wrote with my mom. And then the second book, which is a series, is called Pressure, No Match for Purpose. And that's the book for the student athlete. So it's one book, but it's broken into 4 components. So that's why it's a series. So the first book is a deluxe edition, which is just a story. And then I took that story and broke it into high school, college, and then graduates. So that's where the 4 books come in. So it's the main book is the deluxe version, and then the 3 books is workbook. So it's the story, and at the end of each chapter, I'm asking you questions so that you can fill into your story and write it out. And literally, it's guiding you through the transitions. Like like how to see yourself as a product, target audience, selling, market yourself, negotiation, how to select, like literally it's a step-by-step process walking you through literally high school, college, and graduate. So much so that I wanted to like demo and test drive it with a couple kids. And so like one of the kids that I test drove it with, I still got the text message. He texted me, was like, hey, I got my offer. Cool. I was like, let me try on somebody else. Same thing. Hey, I can show you text. Hey, I read your book and I got my offer. Boom, boom, boom. And so like it's so cool and refreshing to hear the kids saying like the stuff worked for them. Then it was just basically teaching them like the brand, like how to build, leverage, and utilize your brand. And so they were able to reap the benefits of it because they read the book. They actively wrote within the workbook at the end of each chapter and put it into action. And so that's the second book, which is a series. And then my last book is a children's book about my oldest daughter and basically teaching kids about dreaming big. Like you can literally be whatever you want to be in life as long as you dream it and believe it. And so it's just that children's book is just a reminder for my daughter, just to let her know, like if I happen to not be here anymore, at least she can have a printed version or a copy of like no matter what in life, I'm gonna keep on dreaming big and going after what it is I said I want. And the beautiful thing at the end of the children's book, it takes you to a place at the table where you have that support system with your parents. Like my wife is in there and her younger sister, and it's just telling like my wife reiterates to her, anything that you believe, you can do it. And so it's just all about like I just love like when it comes to the kids, like just letting them dream big and going after the things that they want, and then having a support system to provide you that support in order to reach it. And so when it comes to those books, obviously it's 3 books, but one of the books is a series, which makes it 6.
Totally cool though, man. Like that's so, and even the memoir about your mom, like that is so cool. What an amazing idea that was, by the way, because like, yeah, what a great way to honor her. You know what I mean? That's super.
I just forgot about that. Like speaking on what you just said, because of that book, because it's mainly dedicated to individuals with lupus, but not only with individuals with lupus, people that are in the same family that know somebody with lupus. So like it says it from my mom's perspective, like her story going through lupus and overcoming it. And literally my mom's thing was like, I just wanted to share my story so it can help you with your story, because lupus is a chronic disease. Like there's no cure for it. The only way you can do is try to manage it. And so like the thing about lupus, it needs people to share their story so it can help people cope with what they have, like with the flare-ups and things of that nature, so that they can be better prepared within their journey. And so I've got tremendous reviews from that book in regards to like people reaching out to me, lupus foundations reaching out to me, wanting to interview me, talking to me about like from a caregiver side, like how did you maneuver through those difficulties and seeing your mom like that. Like people are asking me like, hey, my mom has lupus. How do I, as a person who's seeing it, like how do I respond? Like what do I do? So it's cool to see like literally both sides. Like it's from a perspective of a caregiver and also from a perspective that a person that actually has lupus. So that book was really impactful in regards to like giving people the knowledge and tools to kind of navigate through it.
Wow, man, that's so cool. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you guys are listening to this, I'm going to have, K Scott give me the links to those. They're all in Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put them there. I just want to make sure I get each one of them like set properly. Mm-hmm. So if you guys are interested in snagging a book, we'll put the links here in the description so you guys can check it out. And yeah, K Scott, you've been doing TED Talks. You're doing it all. Literally, dude. You're like literally doing the entrepreneurial world. You got courses, TED Talks. So with the TED Talks situation,
yes.
Where do we find these, and what's the plans for that in the future too, man?
Yeah, the TED Talk situation was crazy how it came about. I just had a random idea. I was like, man, I seen it on YouTube a lot. I was watching it, I studied. I was like, man, you know what? I want to do a TED Talk one day. I didn't know how. I knew I had a story. And so literally, like any sales thing, I looked online at TED Talks. I looked at it like, okay, what are the TED Talks in Texas? I grabbed a list and I got everybody's contact information. I made the calls and they just set up an interview. And based off the theme, they were like, look, you fit for this. And bam, I sold my story. It was like, we got to have you on. And to this day, I'm still close with the TEDx organizer. And so much so that she was like, hey, I would love to have you on a committee to like where we select speakers and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. But the TED Talk was amazing. It was an amazing experience. It actually was crazy. it was actually kind of like my first professional speech. You know what I'm saying? Like I've always done like speaking opportunities before, but like more so on the level of like they were, just for favors and stuff like that. Never like where people wanted to like hire you on. So like actually that TED talk was like my first like paid, well not paid, it wasn't paid, my first like professional gig. And then from there, it just like, it kind of like labeled me as like this speaker, and it just sprouted on, and people was like, hey, can you come speak here? Can you come speak here? And so it was an amazing journey, something I didn't really think about, but it just happened, and I'm grateful for it.
Yo, dude, it goes to show it. I mean, I'm telling you, everything in your story right now that we've just talked about for an hour, taking advantage of opportunities when they're presented to you. That's what you did with that. You never know. Like if you went and did the work though, see, this is the thing. It's not like it just fell in your lap. You did it. You had an opportunity. You said you got the contact information. You reached out. Same thing you did with the coaches. You got all the contact information. You reached out. There's a consistent theme here, and I hope people are listening to that and understanding that. Like there's a theme here. Like you've got to follow the process. But you did that. One TED Talk kind of just provides you a platform, and then all of a sudden people can see it. You never know what can happen, right? You never know what if you do something. You never know what's going to happen, and people can benefit from it.
I forgot to say one more thing too, and I apologize for prolonging this interview, but
you're great, dude.
The greatest experience I had was this experience, and it didn't have to do anything with speaking. Well, actually, it kind of does. So at University of Utah, I got in touch with the alumni group, and there's some awesome people in our alumni team. And so I went and did like this event for them to where like it brings more exposure to alumni to be more involved with Utah. And so the individuals, we gathered a great relationship, and everybody knows that I do music as well. And so it was to a point where one day I was talking and I was telling a story about how there's this Little Caesar that's right across the street from University of Utah. How I used to go there almost every day just to get some Little Caesars, because that most likely sometimes, we didn't have that much money in regards to college. That may be my only meal. You have to bust down that pizza into two, eat some now, save some for later type thing. And then, but I used to eat there a lot. And one of the ladies that I know, she was like, man, it's crazy. I actually have a friend who works at the corporate office at Little Caesars. And I said, what? And so we had that relationship, and this is why relationships are so important. And then on top of that, I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool? Because everybody know I do music. I was like, man, I would love for my song, because Utah plays my song Rise Up in the stadiums and even Go Crazy in the stadiums. Wouldn't it be cool to have my song, like me performing with the band? And so it was like, that would be cool. I actually know the band director. So I connected with the band director, and it's so much so to where they took my music and then made it live. Like me and my friend who produced it, they took the instrumentation and made it live. So cool. Now I got this Little Caesars thing. Now I got this opportunity with the band to perform at halftime with them. And so now with this connection, what I did was like, how cool would it be that we did like a partnership thing to where everybody in the stadium like can get a free crazy bread, like, I'm saying, crazy bread opportunity for everybody that comes to that game in this performance, blah, blah, blah. So we got to a point where everybody in the whole stadium was able to get free crazy bread. And on top of that, which is the best thing too, on the crazy bread, it's the name of my song called Go Crazy. And so like, it was like, the story sounds sporadic, but like all those pieces together, it just seems so cool as far as like, you never know what opportunities may come for you. You just got to put yourself in the right positions to make everything work. Like make relationships, connecting with people. Like I connected with her. She connected with the Little Caesars. I connected with the band person to create this opportunity. Then once these opportunities created, I presented the value in it. And then not only did it help that, but the marketability of like, I have a song that called Go Crazy. And so with all that, it helped the ratings of my song even go up even more, because people was like, man, he's playing a song here. It's actually on the crazy bread too. And like, in addition, it helps Little Caesars too, because of foot traction. You get someone a free coupon. Not only they're gonna go to get that free coupon, they're not just gonna leave with just crazy bread. They're gonna try to buy pizza with it too, and they might try to buy it. So now it's like, from a business standpoint, like it's gonna make it even more worth it for them. From the band director, like it's gonna give them more exposure to their band, and so like any opportunity that I have, I always try to find value to where it's a win-win, not just for me, but for everybody involved. So like, that's what I think of too, kind of like to mesh the theme of the story. Is like whenever you do get an opportunity or come to the table with an opportunity, you always want to make sure when you're negotiating certain things that like it's a win-win for everybody. Because if someone feels like you're trying to gain more than them, they're gonna be like, man, I don't like this person. And then now the second time you try to come to them, they're gonna be like, nah, they're gonna be standoffish. But if you always present win-win situations for all parties involved, like the sky's the limit on what it can produce. And so, I just thought about that story because I was like, man, that's cool for everyone to know. It's like, always make sure when you negotiate, make it a win-win for everybody.
Ooh, man, that whole story and low key, like Little Caesars, we can hate on it if we want to, but if you want, like, I just seriously, it's probably 4 months ago. I told my wife this. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm 35, but I mean, Little Caesars is one of the better pizzas out there. And everybody hates on it, man. I'm like, dude, $5, $6 for a pizza, it's one of the best pizzas out there. I'll say it right now. I don't even care.
Tell me about it. That's what I say. And then they got these crazy puffs now. The little crazy I tell people all the time, Little Caesars is the best pizza. And this is not no paid sponsor ad or nothing. But this trust me, this Little Caesars, I'm getting the camera. Little Caesars is the best pizza out there. Sponsor the next video.
Let's go, dude. No man. People think I'm crazy. I'm like, dude, I don't need to go spend like $35 for a large pizza. Like, I legitimately believe Little Caesars is one of the best pizzas. It hits the spot for like $5, dude. You kidding me? And you're right. Like, I'll end up getting wings if they have them over there. I'll get the little puffs, like, dude, because they're good, man. Good for them. They had a great business model. That's why they still stuck around. You know what I mean? Exactly. It's cool you got to work with them, man. So the very end of this, K. Scott, what is the biggest life lesson you've taken away from your entire sports career? What has sports taught you? Biggest life lesson, if you could just say one thing that sports have taught you that you've been able to implement into the rest of your life, whether that's fatherhood, being a spouse, being a business owner, being an athlete, whatever. What is the biggest life lesson sports has taught you?
I think the biggest life lesson that sports has taught me is that pressure is no match for purpose. Like, I know it sounds cliche and I know it's the title of my book, but I really truly feel that way. Throughout my whole life, I've been through adversity. I've been through challenges. I've been through opposition. But if my goal or my purpose wasn't greater than those oppositions or challenges and adversity that I was faced with, then I would have stopped immediately. So don't allow the pressures that you may be going through, whether you're going transitioning from one phase to the next one. Don't let it ever stifle you along your journey. And just remember that pressure is no match for purpose.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, man. It's been an awesome conversation. I know we'll be chatting more after this too. And dude, I'm stoked to be able to get to meet you, and I'm grateful for you sharing your story on this platform. I know the listeners will be ecstatic as well. And I'll shout out to the listeners right now and just say, hey, if you guys enjoyed this, leave us a review, right? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Again, it's being sponsored by K. Scott. No, I'm just joking, but cards going your way. No, but maybe Little Caesars will sponsor the 5-star review gift cards or whatever. We'll see. But if you guys enjoyed it, leave us a review. That'd be awesome. Hit us with the subscribe button because we'll be coming to you next week with another interview. But again, K. Scott, just want to say thanks, brother, for joining the show, man.
Man, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for not only for the interview, but all the insight that you provided me that's going to help me outside of this. So definitely appreciate you, man. Can't wait to continue to talk soon.
Absolutely, brother. For all those out there, we'll talk to you next week. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.